Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Spiritual Journalist. I'm so grateful you found us here, and I'm so grateful to today's guest for joining us. We have Heather Donaldson joining us for today's episode. She is an ICU nurse who has been treating the sickest of the sick COVID patients throughout the past 2 years. And today, she has agreed to share her perspective on the pandemic. Now, normally these conversations, we invite you to give your input, ask your questions, be super involved. I do want to preface this conversation by saying that we really don't want people to share their opinions today. Not because we don't value your perspective, but because today is all about Heather sharing her perspective and all of us opening up our awareness to her experience. We really hope that you leave today's conversation with an expanded understanding and more empathy and compassion for the people who have been treating the sick and really knees deep in this pandemic for the past 2 years. So we're going to dive right into the conversation. And again, please just be respectful and open-minded today.
I've always been a deeply curious person, talking with anyone who would listen and soaking in as much information as possible. So it's no surprise my love for storytelling led me to a career in journalism. But after nearly a decade working in newsrooms across the West Coast, I realized I wanted to start asking questions you probably wouldn't see on your local news. So I left my job as a morning TV reporter and started The Spiritual Journalist. This isn't just a YouTube channel, podcast, website, or social media page. This is a live conversation where you get to ask questions too, because I'm not the expert. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. My goal is to connect you with people who have profound experiences and inspirational stories to share. And we'll definitely mix a little astrology in too. So if you're like me, you have this insatiable curiosity and you love deep conversations too, well, this is the place for you. Together each week, we'll explore everything from crystals and tarot to mental health and the environment. There are no wrong questions here. My ultimate goal is for you to come away from each episode with a new perspective and an expanded consciousness. This is a channel for the collective. This is a community for the curious. This is The Spiritual Journalist.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So the last time we chatted like this, I was still working at a local news station. In fact, I've interviewed you like 3 or 4 times now through the local news, and now I'm so excited to have you on my own show.
I'm excited to be here.
It's so funny too, because, we've done a couple interviews throughout the pandemic about your job and your experience, but the first time we met was actually at, I think, a Goodwill,
Yes.
because you were doing a thrift shopping segment through,
Yes.
which is just so funny. Like, that's how we connected and how it's blossomed and we become friends over the past couple of years. But I feel like I also want people to know that, like, you're not just an ICU nurse. You are like such an eclectic person. Like, you have all these interests that you're always sharing on social media, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of interest. That is for sure. My Instagram can't decide if it wants to be like music or outdoors or like public health. It's all over the
It's
place.
It's all of it. It's
Yeah.
all the parts of your personality. And speaking of, we like to start these interviews with a look at our guest's birth chart. I think it's more fun than you just diving into your resume or, telling us what you do for a living. We'll get into that. But
Yeah.
you said you've never had a birth chart reading before, right?
No, and I've seen you do this, and I'm very excited.
I am so excited we'll just do a little snapshot. It won't be a super in-depth reading because we could probably be here forever, but I want to just hide that there. Okay, so we know you're a Scorpio, right? You know this.
Yes,
Have you done your sun, moon, rising, or is that all you know about astrology so far?
that's all I know about astrology.
Okay, so exciting. So not only are you a Scorpio sun, but you're actually a Scorpio moon as well. And so am I. So we have something in
Nice.
common. And so that means you were probably born right around a new moon, probably right before a new moon, like a day or two before, or maybe just a couple hours even. But your moon sign rules your internal self. So your sun sign is more like your personality. And you're a very passionate person, very on par for Scorpio. Also, I find that Scorpio placements, specifically Scorpio moons, are very musically inclined people. Like a ton of pop stars have Scorpio moons, which I think is so perfect because I don't know if I want to say you used to be a singer, you are a singer.
Yeah, yeah. I was a singer before I was a nurse. I did that. I mean, I lived in LA for 12 years. I had a band. I like did the whole thing. I have albums.
And if people want to listen, your stage name, remind me of it again. It's like Lady
Uh,
K, Lady Catherine.
Lady Catherine, yes.
Yes, I love this so much. You actually you have a stellium in Scorpio as well. So you also, it looks like, have Pluto in, or was that Mercury? Hold on, I gotta scroll down because they're all looped together. So you have Pluto in Libra, Venus in Scorpio also. Okay.
All the
So
Scorpios.
yeah, yeah. So when you have three or more planets in a sign, it's known as a stellium, which means like you're going to express as very Scorpio, and having Venus in Scorpio too, like you're probably drawn to Scorpio energy. Maybe you like having Scorpios around you as well. But Scorpio is kind of the most deeply feeling sign of the zodiac. Like you have a lot going
Yeah.
on inside of you, which is probably why you're so artistic, because Scorpios are very creative as well. But you also have quite a bit of Libra energy with Pluto in Libra, and your North Node is in Libra. And Libra can be indecisive a little bit, which is kind of funny that you've like changed direction a lot of different times because the North Node is the direction we're heading, the lessons we're learning. And Libra has to do with like beauty and balance as well. So learning lessons about balance throughout your life. But I think that's funny that it's in Libra and you're just kind of like, well, we'll just see
I'll do
where the
this
wind
for
takes us.
now.
Yeah.
I'll do that for now.
Exactly, exactly. And then your Mercury, I think, is in Sagittarius. Yeah, right on the cusp of Sagittarius. So Mercury in Sag is interesting. As a communicator, you might be a little bit more like spontaneous or impulsive with your words. You kind of like might be known for kind of like blurting things out, but also it makes you more like outgoing and expressive in that way. So that can be really nice. And I think also being like a performer and being willing to put yourself out there, having Mercury and Sagittarius is a strong placement. But your rising sign, so your sun, moon, rising are kind of your big three. We always talk about your sun is in Scorpio, your moon is in Scorpio. Your rising sign is like your first impression or kind of like your aura, like what you kind of put out when people first meet you. And it sets the stage for your whole chart. And your rising sign is in Pisces. So Pisces, the past couple weeks, while the sun has
Mm.
been in Pisces, there's probably been a lot of focus on like your appearance, your purpose, how you're showing up in the world. But having a Pisces rising means like the energy you're putting out or the first impression you're giving off is very gentle and empathetic and compassionate. And I would say this makes you, I mean, I've never been your patient, but as a nurse, having a Pisces rising, it's very healing energy too.
Mm.
I'm not sure if you've ever heard patients like compliment you on your bedside manner, but I would imagine you have an amazing bedside manner because of your Pisces rising.
Yeah.
And
I'm
I
all
do.
here for this. I'm like, tell me more.
Yes.
All of
Okay.
these
So
things are like exactly right. It's so weird. It's
I love
so
it.
cool.
So your Jupiter is in your fourth house in Cancer, which is very interesting, because that to me screams like fertility and abundance. But I don't know if that's something you necessarily want in your life. But if you wanted
It's
children, I would
there.
say you would be very fertile. And just family also, Jupiter is kind of like it magnifies everything it touches. It's very abundant, very optimistic. So I would say, even if it's not you becoming a mother, you probably have a very positive relationship with your mother, or family. Your roots, your home is very important to you, and you've had a lot of fortune when it comes to that part of your life, the family who raised you or creating your own family.
Mm.
And let's see, your Mars is in Leo, so that gives you a lot of stamina and energy. Mars is, our energy, our drive, our motivation, and being in Leo, would again make you a great performer. Leo is very performative, but also you have like a fiery passion for things. And when you're
Yeah.
really passionate about something, you're going to go like all in towards it, and not look back. That's what Mars and Leo tells me. And then your Saturn, I believe, is also in Leo. Let me just double check, because you got a lot of things right on the cusp. Yeah, so 29 degrees Leo. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Saturn returns, but we go through our Saturn return basically between like 27, 28 and 30, 31. That's how long it takes for Saturn to make a lap around the sun and come back to the same place it was when you were born. So with your Saturn being in your sixth house in Leo, I would say probably right around the time you were just about to turn 30, there was a change to, or some sort of lesson learned to your routine or your habits. And if I had to guess, I would say this has to do with you being a performer, because Leo is more of like that performative energy. It's definitely like, very magnetic and wants to put itself out there, and the performer of the zodiac. So I would guess sometime in that age range was when you kind of decided to change the structure, the routines of your life, and maybe away from performing, because it's the very end of Leo. There could have been like some closure there. Not sure if that tracks, but that's what
I
I
was
would guess.
I was married. I got married when I was 28, and I don't know, I was only married for 7 months. It's a crazy story, but we can talk about that later. But after that husband was a British guitar player,
Oh,
and
okay.
he was totally crazy. And after that ended, I sort of started to focus on my own music. I was already focusing on my own music, but that's when I really um, started learning how to play guitar more so that I could support myself, like alone, and perform with a band. And I created Lady Catherine, like basically just after that. And
Interesting.
yeah, it is interesting.
Okay, so it did have to do with like performing, but maybe not ending it, maybe just starting a new chapter of it, or some lessons coming from, that relationship forcing you to change gears when it came to that part of your life. But I
Yeah.
always like to point out people's Saturns, because it's like Saturn return is always, it's always a rough patch of life where we learn some lessons. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah, and then your midheaven is in Sagittarius. That's the highest point of your chart, and it tells you where you're going to like achieve the highest point of success in your career, like the most potential in your career. And it being in Sagittarius, it's all about higher learning and sharing what we're learning. And so I think it's really cool that you're kind of stepping into that role with your schooling. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you're kind of moving away from being a nurse and into a nurse practitioner, right?
Yeah.
And kind of into more preventative medicine, which is more about like sharing what you've learned and putting out information. Sagittarius rules publishing. And so it opposes Gemini. Gemini is more about gathering the information, whereas Sagittarius is more about like sharing the information.
Mm.
Also, Sagittarius rules like travel, long-term travel. So, that could come up for you as well when it comes to your career and the potential there.
Mm.
So yeah, but bottom line is you have a lot of Scorpio energy. And you actually have a grand trine in water signs because you have Jupiter in Cancer too. So like you're a very emotional being, and all of these placements in water signs are like working together to bring balance into your emotions, which is really, really beautiful, especially having a grand trine in water signs. You're probably extremely intuitive and empathetic, I would imagine. I don't know if you feel like an empath, but I would guess you are just by looking at your chart.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I think that's my downfall in nursing, actually, is that, especially in the ICU, is that some of those cases can be really, really, really difficult. And if you are, prior to being a nurse, I was an artist. And when you're an artist, you really are trained to tune into your senses and to tune into, like, your feelings. And then when you're a nurse, it's like if you're too raw, some of those situations you can really take them home with you and they can affect you. So anyway, all very
It's
interesting.
I think it's so beautiful too that you have a Pisces rising, because I think regardless of your job, you'll always show up as that artist because the Pisces is a very artistic energy. They can kind of get like lost in a fantasy because they are so artistic and creative. But luckily, you have some other more like deep placements to kind of bring you back down to this realm or even below. But yeah, I just think it's really funny that you're a Pisces rising because even though you're not showing up on Instagram as the singer persona necessarily anymore, I feel like every time you show up, it's very artistic. Like you just are an artist, you know?
Well, I appreciate that because I feel like I am one, and it's nice to know people perceive me that way. I'm not trying to be anything, just trying to be authentic. So,
Well, it's working. So that's just a
yay.
little sneak peek at your chart. I'm sure we could go way deeper, but people want to hear about your experience and your story as well. So, Court's watching. She's a Pisces rising too. So I think since we kind of touched on the fact that you used to be a singer and you lived in LA, I'm really curious to know when you made the decision to become a nurse, because if I remember correctly, you have people in the medical field in your family, right?
Yeah, like everyone in my family is a nurse. My mom's a nurse, my dad's a nurse. Both of my grandmothers were nurses. I have an aunt that was a nurse in Vietnam, another aunt who is a nurse, a cousin that's a nurse. My other cousin's a vet. I mean, if you're not, the joke in my family is that if you're not a nurse, you're a nun or a priest. Because there's lots of those in my family too.
That's
Um,
hilarious.
and I was like, well, I'm not going to be a nun or a priest.
No,
So,
Scorpio is like, absolutely not. I will not be a nun.
absolutely. So, yeah, so my family was always really pushing me to go that direction, but I was not really drawn to that when I was younger. I was always very bright in high school and, was really driven academically, but I also was really interested in things like photography and journalism, actually. And yeah, I was just more drawn to things that were aesthetically pleasing or creative. And I went to college. Sorry if I'm going, you can stop me anytime if I'm going on a
Keep it
tangent,
going.
but
Yeah.
I went to college. Um, I went to Boston University for college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I started off as like a bio major and thought I wanted to do pre-med. And then I went to those courses and it was like 200 people in an auditorium.
Did we lose you? I'm waiting for you to come back. If you can still see me, you might have to reload. But I'm on the edge of my seat here. Gotta love doing things live. Okay, I think she's gonna come back. But thank you if you're watching. Gotta love these technical difficulties of doing live shows. But Heather will be back in a second. I was trying to also, I interviewed Heather at the very beginning, like seriously 2 weeks into the pandemic, and then again right in the middle. And I was going to try and bring up some of those interviews to show you, but technology struck again and did not want to add them to the live stream. So I will go ahead and put them in the comments after and in the show notes if you're listening as a podcast and you're curious. We did a whole long interview I think I published to my Instagram probably close to 2 years now, a year and a half ago now. And at the very beginning, we did a little piece. And I think that's also on my Instagram too. Maybe I can find it while she's coming back on with us, because it really is interesting, regardless of how you feel about the pandemic or how it was handled or what's going on. It is really cool to go back and look at her perspective and how much has changed over the past 2 years. Let me see. Here's one of them. This interview was December 2020. So I just added that one to the comments. And then let me see if I can find the other video as well. Oh no, she says, I think the feed is frozen. Thanks for hanging in there if you're still watching. Let me know if you can still see me and hear me. Heather says she's having a hard time getting back in. She's still trying. Okay, can you guys still see me and hear me if you're watching? I know there's a couple of you watching still. Oh, okay. You can see me. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Heather's coming back. She's trying. Oh. She says she's in, but she can't see me. So let me try. You guys, this is real life right now. I'm blaming the square between Mars and Uranus because Uranus rules technology. So we're just going to go with that. Thank you, Claudia. You guys are the best. Just hanging with me here. Actually, this is a fun moment. I've been meaning to share this on my morning live streams. I'll have to go back and cut all of this random chit chat out of the video, and of course out of the podcast too. But while we wait for Heather, the streaming service I use just added some sound effects. So, okay, she got the new link. A gasp. I need to start using these in the mornings. Okay, yay! Yay, Heather is back.
Where was
Yeah,
I?
you get an applause for making it back. I was
I
just
just
like,
noticed that your picture was like frozen for a second, and I was like, oh no, I've been talking for a while.
you paused, and I was like, can you hear me? Hello? But you were probably just talking away to yourself.
I was.
Okay, so you were saying that, and we'll go back after this is over. I'll cut out the awkward pause and everything. So,
I'm not worried.
exactly. You were saying that you went to Boston College and you were in these big lecture halls and kind of thinking about doing pre-med, but it wasn't going how you wanted it to.
I was just bored. And I felt like this was the first time I was away from my house and I was in Boston and I wanted an adventure. And I wanted this experience. And so, anyway, I really didn't know what I should major in. I didn't have a strong sense that I should go one direction over the other. I went to college when I was 17, so I was like, I mean, you're so young, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, in any case, I ended up graduating with a degree in economics because it was the fastest way to graduate. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, I just need to make a decision. And I had all of these credits. And so I got a degree in economics and I was bartending through college because I had to, Boston University was a very expensive college and my parents couldn't afford it altogether and they actually went bankrupt after my sophomore year, and so I had to figure out how I was going to graduate quickly, and I started bartending because you can bartend when you're 18 in Boston. And
Wow.
I know, like, it's so weird, right? Like, I bartended in like a nightclub too. It was crazy. Anyway, I did that, and I was introduced to a lot of different people through the nightclub scene. And I liked to sing when I was in college. I was just something I kind of did. I used to write little songs and sing, and I started meeting up with different music producers, and we were making like little dance beats in college. And then when I graduated, my sister was living in Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles and she was doing acting. And I was like, oh, I want to do acting. And then I wasn't a very good actress. And I wasn't. I used to get so, I still do, get so self-conscious. And, you know, you'd have to like
Really?
walk into a room and they'd, you know, tell you to do something absolutely absurd. And, you know, maybe wearing a bikini, you know, because like auditions are crazy. I could go, that's a whole other story, but like auditions are insane in Los Angeles. It's like a audition for Smart Pop, and they want you to like wear a bikini and run around the room and say anyway, I didn't like it. It didn't feel right. So then I started to focus more on music, and I went through many different, like, I don't know, many different versions of music projects until I finally found one that I really vibed with. And I liked the sound, I liked the people, I liked the style of music we were producing. And then I named that project Lady Catherine and sort of worked on and developed that over a period of several years with different musicians and one producer. And yeah, that was like an entire experience. And it was probably the one time I felt like I was most my most authentic self was when I was doing that. But I was broke.
I was just about to ask. So why did you stop? Why did you become a nurse? And I'm assuming that had something to do with it.
Yeah, I think I was in my 30s. I had sort of been doing different artistic projects like acting, commercials, music, and really developing music, and had released, I think, two albums, almost got a record deal, then didn't. And so I was in my, I think I was 30, just after 30, like 32 or something. And I was like, I have a degree, but I don't know what I want to do. Um, I like this music thing, but I'm not making money. And it's really, really, really difficult to put your entire self into something and then, maybe two or three people come to a show, or you don't get all the record sales that you expected, or, then you got to show up to your waitressing job and some manager's like nasty to you, or a customer or whatever. So I just started to become, and I also didn't like, um, when you're promoting your art, you have to talk about yourself all the time. Like, this is what I'm doing, this is my show, here's my song, listen to this, me, 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 me. And I was uncomfortable with that. And so I wasn't very good. I was good at creating the music, but not very good at marketing the music. And so I decided to go back to school. My parents, of course, were like, well, nursing. No, you could do nursing, and then you can just like do the music stuff on the side. You could do like 3 12-hour shifts. You could even work part-time and make more money than you're making now. And of course, I became a nurse, and I think I wrote one EP in Sacramento and recorded it. And then I really haven't uh, been working on a lot of music since. I've been doing a lot of other things.
So it's almost like becoming a nurse was kind of like a means to an end. And, it wasn't this like
Yeah,
huge calling for you, but you've been a nurse how many years now? Probably like 5 or 6 years now?
I think 7. I think I became a
Okay.
nurse in 2014, I think. Um, and I've been at Davis for 5. And so I think 7-ish, around 7. Yeah, it wasn't really, I was very resistant because I knew what it was. I knew what nursing was. That was what my parents did. That was boring. That's not what I was going to do. And then when I started doing clinicals and when I actually took my first job as a nurse, I realized that you had this like, I had a job where I was on my feet. Every day was different. I had the opportunity to do something that was really, truly needed and wanted, and that people, for the most part, appreciated what I did, and that I could make a difference in people's lives. It wasn't like they had to go listen to my song and that might trigger something for them. It was like I could make a difference right there in the moment with a person by having an authentic human connection. And that was really valuable to me. So, and then I just, continued to get more and more into nursing, and found myself in the ICU, which is where you go if you're really wanting a challenge.
I was going to say, for somebody who wasn't like sold on nursing, the ICU seems like the most intense nursing environment you could possibly be in.
Yeah.
And I do think it's interesting that to the Scorpio in you is like, we have to do like the most intense
Yeah.
version of this job, like can't just be like a fun like
You got to go
pediatric
all in.
nurse or yeah, that's very Scorpio. So how did you find yourself in the ICU, and how did you know like that was kind of the place for you?
I um I think I always wanted more when I started nursing. Like my parents were both OR nurses, so I very much knew what operating room. I mean, obviously I didn't have a personal experience of what that was like, except for very limited experience in nursing school trying it out, but I knew what that was about. And I knew what floor nursing was about, and I knew that that was mostly just like passing meds and passing food trays, ambulating patients, walking them around, but not a lot of like real medicine, not a lot of like care management. And ICU is like you have all this advanced life saving equipment, and you have to understand how to use it. You're using all these different complex medical management of patients, which is also, you have to understand how that works in the body. And you're also dealing with very unstable patients. So you have to understand the physiology of you know, humans and how these different interventions that you're doing work in the body. And you also have to alert the doctors because they're not there all the time. You're the one that's there with the patient. So you have to know when it's appropriate to alert the doctors. And I don't know, I found the whole thing very fascinating. I still do. I love the medicine in the ICU. I love managing patients. I like it when my patients are extremely ill because I mean, I don't like it for them, obviously, but it's a real academic challenge for me. And I like that. So, but there are other parts of it that are difficult sometimes because at the end of the day, that's somebody's loved one who's in a really bad place. And oftentimes, they don't understand the interventions. I mean, it took me many, many years and a lot of training to understand all of these things. And it's often a challenge to try to explain what we're doing and what that means and, you know, what the prognosis is and all of that. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because we touched on this in your chart. Scorpio also loves research. So, there's probably part of you that has like this insatiable curiosity, right? Like always wanting to learn more, always wanting to go deeper. And it's also interesting because Pisces, your rising sign, tends to rule medicine and hospitals. So, like you literally physically showing up in hospitals makes sense. But the combination of all the water in your chart, like we talked about, makes you extremely empathetic. And, one of my friends, her business partner used to be a nurse, and she was so highly empathetic that like she almost like psychic when it came to medicine. Like she could feel like a gunshot wound coming into the emergency room, and she had to stop being a nurse because she was like, it's too much.
it's too
So how do you,
stressful. Yeah.
right. And if you were like actually feeling these really intense medical emergencies like in your own body, how can you take care of other people? So what do you do, and like how have you been able to navigate that sense of empathy and like being able to feel maybe on a more sensitive level what some of your coworkers might not be able to?
I mean, I think I do everything I possibly can to take care of myself. I eat a healthy diet. I try to get sleep. I get exercise as often as I can. I, do things that get me in touch with the outdoors, like backpacking and hiking and rock climbing, because I feel like that's a really important part of being grounded and centered. And, I just generally try to take care of myself. I also try to limit my exposure to, people who are toxic influences in my life. And I try to do things that are healing for me, like, give myself little home facials or, we have like a bath in our garden. So
I love that.
So sometimes I take like outdoor baths. I mean, ridiculous self-care things definitely get me through. But that doesn't mean there aren't cases that don't, affect me. And I also feel like it is important to show up for your patients and their families. There's a thing in nursing called, or in, I guess, medicine, in healthcare, called compassion fatigue. And a lot of people are obviously struggling with that now because we just went through this like crazy period that sort of seems to be resolving a little bit. But, a lot of people saw a lot of terrible things happen to a lot of people. So I think that was difficult for people to experience the pandemic in the hospital as it was happening, and also all the other changes that were happening in their personal lives.
And that's really why I wanted to bring you on to talk about the pandemic. It's something that, I think a lot of people are over it, right? Like
Yeah,
literally just don't want to talk about it anymore.
I'm
And
over it.
yeah, right? Like, and it's okay to say that. It's
Yeah.
totally, especially, I'm sure there's part of you for a long time as a nurse that was like, okay, well, I have to kind of like almost be a representative for healthcare workers.
Yeah.
And, it's exhausting for a normal person. I can't even imagine what it would be like when you're still going to work every day and having to like medically deal with people going through COVID when you're like over all of the lifestyle changes that we've been going through.
Yeah.
So that's really why I wanted to bring you on to share your perspective, because I think people are at this point where we're like, okay, we just want to be done with it. But it's like, there's still a lot of healing that needs to be done for all of us. Like, there's a lot that the pandemic brought up, not just medically, but emotionally and with security issues, food security, emotional security. And, I think hearing your perspective and like understanding that there are people who can't just turn off the TV and pretend it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can all have a little bit more compassion and empathy for everyone's experience. But there's something you touched on about having so much knowledge and doing so much research. And, sometimes families don't understand the interventions you're giving. Has that been something that's come up for you specifically around coronavirus? Because there's so much information, so much misinformation. So many people have such strong opinions about what's right, what's wrong, what's healthy, what's fake news, what's real news.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine there's a lot of conflict around that when you're treating patients sick with this disease.
Yeah, I mean, I think coronavirus definitely exaggerated those problems that we have in healthcare, in that you have providers and caregivers who have knowledge, and you have patients who often have a knowledge deficit. And we're not always very good at communicating our knowledge. And in order for, a patient to trust a provider or anybody in the caregiving team, they need to believe you. And there was a lot of misinformation and false data running around that wasn't evidence-based, and people were, speaking as if it were, and it was confusing a lot of people. It continues to confuse a lot of people. So yeah, it was challenging. I mean, I remember we would have patients in the ICU who were very, very, very ill, probably, near death. We're paralyzed, they're on a ventilator, multiple medications to support their blood pressure. We're running continuous dialysis because their blood pressure was so low. I mean, this person would die in 5 minutes if they weren't hooked up to all these things, right? And people would call the ICU and say, oh, well, you should be giving them ivermectin. And we were like, when are we going to stop with this ivermectin stuff, guys? Like, it's not evidence-based. It's not like we would give it if there was quality evidence that was showing that this was making a difference. But there's some small observational studies that, showed some promise, and it wasn't well researched. And we're giving other things that are well researched. But anyway, I mean, obviously there's a lot of different opinions out there about how different disease processes should be managed. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to trust your provider and trust that we are practicing evidence-based medicine in this country, and that if your provider isn't practicing evidence-based medicine, then they might be negatively impacting you.
And I think this is a great opportunity to talk about science and evidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there has also been this huge wave in the past year specifically of like trust science, which I'm all for science. I mean, we all learn science. Like, there's a reason we use science in every part of our lives.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting because science is like it's observational, right? It's like you have to do study to trust science.
Yeah.
And so I feel like with everything during this pandemic, I mean, politically, scientifically, there's been so much division. It's so divisive, and people are kind of in these like camps now, or it's created so much division. But how do you view science and the importance of science when it comes to like research and evidence, and how people have been just like using it almost politically, like science is some like political platform?
Well, I think in the context of coronavirus, it is an evolving process, right? It's a very new virus, so we're collecting information and it's changing as we go. And so I think that that is confusing for the public because they're like, "No, you said this initially, and now we're doing it this way." But what about, so I think people have to understand that as we collect more data and we get better data, we implement the better data. So, and that's with anything that happens. I think I've been in school for the last 3 years to be a nurse practitioner, which is basically a primary care provider. So that's who you would go to as your doctor if you wanted, I don't know, anything. If you had a cold or you need to be referred because you felt like you hurt your knee or anyway. So I have to be able to interpret all of the different medical information that's out there and get you where you need to go. And I need to be able to interpret your symptoms and assess you and look at your lab studies and be able to say definitively, yes, these are the conditions that you have and this is how you treat them. And how I get to that conclusion is driven by evidence-based research. I feel like you're
That makes
frozen
sense.
again. Oh, there you are.
Okay. I'm just listening. I'm taking it all in.
Okay.
But yeah, I just think it's so interesting, like how science has evolved to this. I mean, everything has been so politically charged, and I do feel like we're kind of coming away from that, and the dust is kind of settling. But then I have to ask you, when you see, like just a couple weeks ago, like China shutting down again, do you have, for me, I mean, I almost had this like trauma response of like, no, like, no, that's not happening. Like, I can't handle that,
Yeah.
So as someone who like is literally dealing with this, I don't have to go to work and deal with it anymore, at least. When you see new information like that come out, do you get a little bit like nervous or scared, or do you kind of have those responses too?
It's very interesting because I don't get nervous anymore about any of it. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's because I'm vaccinated and I just feel like, okay, this is less of a risk for me now, or or because I had COVID and I'm like, oh, well, I had it. I didn't get all of these horrible, terrible things. So maybe I'll be okay if I have it again. And also our numbers are down in the hospital, like way, way down. So, for me, I try to take all the information that's coming in around me and especially look in my immediate community and try to see like, okay, are things starting to escalate again? Are they going down? And right now we're definitely on a downtrend. It's possible there could be a new variant. It's possible cases could increase. It's possible there could be like a whole other virus that comes along, or we have a nuclear war. I mean, and not to be crazy, but like, I think life is always throwing these obstacles at you. And what coronavirus taught us is that you can't depend on anything to remain static, and you have to be able to adapt and adjust and find ways to cope with the challenges that life throws at you. Otherwise, you're just going to be a broken human.
Wow. Okay, well, that was
So,
beautifully said. I mean, mic drop. Yeah, I would love to talk to you about that actually, because I know when you had COVID, you'd been vaccinated, you'd been boosted. Of course, I mean, I'm guessing you were kind of blindsided by testing positive just because
yeah.
you guys test all the time. You've taken all these precautions, and I think that's something people can relate to, honestly. Like, I know so many people who did everything right. They took all the precautions, they got vaccinated, they listened to the CDC's advice, and they still ended up getting COVID or testing positive and not having the symptoms, which I'm grateful, knock on wood, that hasn't happened to me. But I can imagine it would be extremely frustrating because, like, it is uncertain and you're trying to adapt and you feel like you did everything right, and then you still have to deal with something you thought you wouldn't have to deal with. So what was that like for you? I remember watching your stories at the very beginning, and I saw that Scorpio come out. You were like pissed. You were
I was
pissed. And
mad. I was very mad.
I was mad for you. I was like, Heather she shouldn't have to deal with this,
I was mad for like so many different reasons. And at the end of the day, it's like, why was I even mad? I mean, because this thing at that point, so it was the Omicron variant and it was everywhere. Like it was very clear that this thing was like going through the population like mad, and it was gonna get everyone, and except for you apparently, and my husband.
And your husband is a healthcare worker also, right?
He's a respiratory therapist. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
he like literally sees all the COVID patients. But yeah, so I was I think we went out to dinner, Justin and I went out to dinner, and I had a work like skills day. And then I had a 12-hour shift at work, and there were a few people on my unit whose like family members were sick and they were at work because the policies were changing. And then there was somebody who was probably had or definitely had COVID, but hadn't tested yet positive. And so I was like, oh man, this is coming for me. It's coming for me. I'm going down. And then I remember I went home after being around like a bunch of sick people, and I got like super flushed. Like I was bright red, and I was like, is this coronavirus? Is that what this is? And then I called my mom, and I didn't have any tests. And I was like, I think I need a test because I have to go back to work. And and if I have coronavirus, I don't want to be in the ICU, like taking care of somebody who doesn't have it. And I actually, sorry, I'm rambling, but I was taking care of a very sick patient who didn't have coronavirus. And I was concerned that I may have given it to him. I didn't. They tested him, so it was all good. But yeah, and I was very sick. I was very, very sick. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't have any respiratory symptoms, but I had a really serious flu. I was extremely fatigued. I was like sweating, like, soaking wet. It was a bad flu. And I could see how that could go wrong for some people.
Yeah.
And also, I've also been sort of battling, for what it's worth, my labs have shown that I have a low white count and a low neutrophil count. And this has been over the course of the last 3 or actually 5 years. And so that's something called neutropenia. And I have a suppressed, like that's, based on textbook analysis, I have a suppressed immune system. And so I was concerned that it might affect me poorly. And I've obviously taken care of a lot of patients who, have suffered really terrible symptoms. And sometimes those symptoms don't present themselves until like day 10. And so I was nervous.
I can only imagine, like, having seen the sickest patients, knowing you have the same thing, and what that would do to your mind.
Yeah.
Even like at the very, very beginning, before this was even called a pandemic, I think March 2020, so before we were wearing masks, before there was any shutdown, my boyfriend got COVID, and we had no idea. Like, he was out sick from work for a week, but I was telling him the whole time, like, I think you're just sick. I think you just have a flu. There's no way to get tested right now anyway. He's like, should I go to the hospital? I'm like, not unless you're dying. They don't have anything to do for you there, And he was miserable, like miserable, sweating, but freezing.
Yeah.
And we didn't have anything to do. And this is before, like I said, there were any protocols. So he's home from work, but I'm still going to work every day. I'm like taking care of him and still going into work every day. There was no like, hey, he should get tested, or maybe you should stay home too. None of that. And I was just surprised, like, I didn't have the same symptoms. Like, I know I was exposed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I know, I was sleeping next to him every night. He was, I know I was exposed. So it's so wild to see how it affects people so differently. And I really think until you see someone experiencing extreme symptoms like that, you truly can't have empathy for it. I really don't
No.
think you can, because I family members have had it and they're like, yeah, it sucked. And hearing you, it's like, yeah, it sucks. But until you really see someone, and he never had extreme enough symptoms to get medical help or
No,
anything.
just a
But
bad
even
flu.
but even so, it was so terrible and nothing made him feel better. And so, I appreciate you kind of sharing your symptoms and sharing what you were going through, even though you were like pissed off the whole time. I do, because I think it helps people understand like why all of this information is out there, why it's important to protect yourself, however feels best for you, why it's important to protect other people who are more vulnerable. And I think it's been a huge wake up call to people about their own immune systems. Like, it really is kind of like how secure is my own immune system against fighting not just this disease, but every disease. I think people have really woken up to that. So have you noticed that as well? Like, people just viewing their health differently over the past couple years?
Well, I certainly view my health differently, and I hope that other people are more aware of their health, because uh, it's true that if you do take care of your vessel that carries you through life, that you're going to reduce your risk for chronic disease and illness. And so it's really that simple. I mean, I think, because I'm active and I eat a healthy diet and I, try to get sleep and do all of those interventions that we talked about earlier, I think I'm a pretty healthy person. I have pretty good labs and I did okay with this thing. The patients that I see, for the most part, that do really poorly are not are typically not as healthy as I am. There are some exceptions, however. But yeah, I think taking care of your body and your mind and your spirit are essential to your overall health and well-being.
Absolutely. I want to talk to you about kind of the spiritual component of all of this, because I know you are a spiritual person. You've been
Mhm.
posting more tarot cards on your Instagram, which I am loving.
I'm
Uh,
obsessed right now. I'm out of control. I have too many decks.
I love it. I'm so excited. I tarot is, and just oracle cards in general, I feel like it's like the most fun way to, communicate with spirit or whatever you want to call
It's
it.
like dip your foot
Um,
in.
yeah, it really
Like,
is. And I do want to point out too, the necklaces we're wearing, Heather made while she was sick with COVID or recovering from
yes.
COVID. Totally the artist in you. You're like, I need to create something. I need to do something. And they're all made out of crystals, which is so
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
was very drawn to them. I was like, I had no energy and I wanted to do something creative that I could like do in my bed. And I ordered a bunch of beads and I don't know why. I was just very drawn to stones. And I am in general. I like to rock climb, I like to backpack, I like to have like earth. I like to garden. I like the earth around me. And I wanted to like wear them. I wanted to like have quartz and I don't know, labradorite and various whatever I wanted that day. I wanted it on me, like physically touching my skin. And I wear these necklaces like constantly. I wear them, to bed. I don't take them off. I just like put one on and then I leave it until I decide that I want a different one.
Before we started this live stream, I was telling Heather, like, I love crystals. I have them all around me all the time, but wearing them is different, because I notice with necklaces, especially, like if I'm feeling something intense and I put a crystal necklace on, my whole like vibe changes. Like I can
Yeah.
literally feel it in my field or in my aura, like it's kind of regulating. So I love that, like, post COVID, during COVID, you just started getting into all of these like spiritual modalities. I think there is some weird, interesting connection that I don't even know if it can be explained. But during the past 2 years, the amount of people who have gotten into spirituality through astrology or crystals or even yoga is mind blowing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the environment of the pandemic, of people needing to believe in something, needing to reach for good energy, or if on some weird energetic level, like COVID wakes people up. I don't know, but have you noticed that as well? Like how many more people are getting into spirituality in the past couple of years?
Well, I think that, we all had to go into our homes. And so just prior to the pandemic, I think we were in this like raging social media, like overstimulation from the external world, like not centered, just receiving data constantly, right? Like little snippets of data. And COVID made people have to like retreat into themselves and kind of stop their like typical patterns and routines. And I think they had to like analyze what was important for them. Like, who are the people that matter? What are the things that matter? And I think tapping into spirituality and spiritual energy is a part of that, right? Like, we want to feel like we're all connected. And so, and we want to feel in touch with ourselves. So I don't know exactly why people are feeling the need to like revisit their or center themselves, but I think that's what people are doing. They're just centering themselves.
I think you're right. And I think it was this level of stillness too. For a lot of
Mhm.
people, we had to just sit still and wait. And I think you have to find some semblance of stillness to open yourself up to a connection to a power greater than yourself, whatever that looks like for you. I
Mm.
don't think when like you said before the pandemic, and like Court said the same thing, I was so burned out before the pandemic, so much anxiety. It's like there was this pressure to do all the things and be everywhere and go to all the events and not say no. And it's
Yeah.
like almost gave us this permission slip to be like, nope, my energy is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Connections I have that are really solid connections are the most important thing, not all the like trivial friendships or acquaintances or whatever. So I think it's really kind of wild how many people are getting into spirituality, and I'm here for it. But I have to ask you if your sense of spirituality has changed throughout this pandemic, especially dealing with people who are on the verge of death.
I think that being an ICU nurse, I always see tragic cases, whether it's coronavirus or it's somebody having a heart attack or whatever. Obviously, coronavirus was like a whole new set of challenges and a lot of very, very, very sick patients that were sicker than we've ever seen before, and some that were young, and that was hard. But generally speaking, the people that I see are very sick. And I think that has been a gift for me because it allows me to appreciate or have more appreciation for all of the things that I have, like my health, a beautiful relationship with my husband, like amazing animals, and freedom, just all types of things that people don't have when their health is failing, and when they're ill. And so I just try to really appreciate life and live life to its fullest because we all should be doing that.
And we really never know when it's over,
Yeah.
COVID or not. You really never know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. As much as we like to think we're in control, we have no idea what's going to happen.
Mm.
But what's I interviewed this woman a couple weeks ago who's a medical medium, and she's had her own near-death experiences that kind of opened her up to clairvoyance and all of these things. And I'm curious, when you're dealing with people, I mean, I would venture to guess you have seen people not make it. You have
Oh
seen
yeah, so
people
many.
die. Do you notice anything? There's like
Yeah.
this belief or a rumor or whatever that like your spirit weighs a certain amount because your body weighs a different amount after you die. There's lots of different like theories and things going around. What's your take on, I mean, have you watched someone's spirit leave their body? Like, what is that like?
Yeah, it's funny because I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day, but Oftentimes in the ICU, we are transitioning someone from being on life support to not being on life support, and ultimately they will pass, right? Because without all these interventions and medications continuously running, the person isn't able to make it on their own. So for whatever reason, many different reasons that could be the case. And sometimes that person is not, I get the sense, I don't know how to describe this, but I get the sense that that person is no longer in the room. Their body's there. I just had a patient the other day that was like this. I can't really describe the details of the case, unfortunately, because it would be really interesting if I could. But this patient's family was having a really hard time grasping the fact that, they were not, the team was saying this is medically futile. There was no way that we could save this patient. And we had multiple family meetings about it, trying to describe why that was the case. Because they look in the room and they see their loved one on a ventilator and they see the chest, rising and falling because we're delivering breaths, and they assume that that person is alive. But I had been taking care of this person, and I didn't feel like they were there. And I've felt that before, multiple times, where I just, that person was gone, their body was there, but their spirit was gone. And there are some times when I don't feel that, and a patient is very critically ill, and I will often indicate to their family, if I feel that, like they're still there, to not give up, to, continue, that I've seen crazy things happen in this place. But there's also situations when I know that they're not there anymore. Like I'm certain about it.
Has there ever been a moment where you notice, like, you were treating this patient one day and then you walk in and it's just energetically different? Like you can just kind of tell. Or I know sometimes people who are close to death, there's like this great Netflix series where I think it's called Near Death. And they talk about how people, when they're very close to the end, if they're still somewhat conscious, they start talking to people on the other side, or they get visits from people on the other side, and maybe they just seem out of it. But have you ever like noticed any, I don't want to say like a spiritual intervention like that, where a patient is like speaking to someone who's not there, or very clearly like getting ready to leave their body?
Yeah, I mean, I literally have watched people. So part of being an ICU nurse during withdrawal of care is delivering them medications that help them not suffer when they're actively dying. And because sometimes, obviously, you remove life support and people don't pass immediately, right? Like it could take hours, it could take days in some cases. And so you don't want that person to be suffering for a prolonged period of time. So we give them medications that help with pain and secretions and stuff like that. And there's typically a point in time when, if the person is conscious, because sometimes patients are not intubated, they're not on a ventilator, they're able to speak and talk, but they just don't want to be hooked up to all the machines that keep them going anymore. And so they'll go from being very lucid, and then we will withdraw like blood pressure support medicine, and they'll slowly decline, and they'll go from being awake and interacting with their family to like not there at some point, even though they're still alive, but their spirit leaves. And they're usually, I mean, there's not like a certain point. It's more fluid, but there is a transition that definitely happens from, a spirit being present to a spirit not being present. And I don't really know. I'm not an expert. I don't know how to describe it, but there's a difference. There's a difference there's an energy shift.
And I don't think anyone can really be more of an expert, honestly, other than people who maybe have like the ability to speak to people on the other side, or communicate with people on the other side. But you are someone who has this experience that 99.9% of people don't have, of
Mm.
helping people, in a sense, cross over, you know, helping
Hmm.
people leave their bodies, leave this reality behind. How has that changed your relationship with death?
Yeah, I have this really interesting saying that I use, and I think I made it up, but it's that sometimes the miracle is the end of suffering. So I often use that phrase with patients who, or family members really, because the patient's already not going to make it. And I usually know that at that point. But I use that with the family to help them come to terms with the acceptance of the loss of their loved one. Um, I have watched a lot of families lose their loved ones, and typically the decision to withdraw care is the most difficult time. Once we withdraw care and they see that the process is peaceful and they understand that their loved one won't suffer anymore, um, there's usually the healing can begin. So I'm not really afraid of death. I think death is very much a part of life. Um, but I don't know what happens next.
I don't think any of us do until we get there. You know, that's the
Yeah.
great mystery. Where do we go? Um, yeah, but that's beautifully said. And I'm so thankful that there are people like you in our hospitals who, we're all going to get there at some point. It might not be in a hospital, it might not be in the ICU, but we're all going to
Yeah.
get there at some point. And I just would love to take a moment, not just for you, but for anybody. You know, I have friends who are firefighters, and they're dealing with the same thing a lot of the time, going out to accidents and things like that, where you're with people at their very last moments. And
Mm.
I think at the beginning of COVID and the pandemic, we were all so like, we have to support our healthcare workers, and, you know, they're angels and all these things. And as the fatigue has set in and people are over talking about it, it's like we forget it's not just about COVID. It's about health in general. It's about protecting ourselves in general. And also, just because COVID numbers might be down doesn't mean that you guys still aren't facing really difficult things every day and having to hold that space for people in their hardest moments all the time. And so I just
Hmm.
really want to acknowledge that with you and just anyone else who works in the healthcare field. Like, it's not an easy job, and it takes
No.
a strong person to be able to go back to that every day. Like I said, there's a friend of a friend who had to stop being a nurse because she like energetically could not handle the trauma coming in. So yeah, I really want to acknowledge that, not just for you, but for everybody who has continued to show up to work. Have you seen people leaving the medical industry? Like, I know for me in the news industry, everyone and their mother is leaving the news industry after the pandemic, for a lot of different reasons, not just
Yeah.
the pandemic. But it's like the past 2 years have been this like boiling point that have, not just with certain industries, but the great resignation, people leaving their jobs, people realizing what's really important to them. Has that happened in the medical field as well?
Oh, completely. There are, I would say, I work in an ICU that's right next to another ICU, and the staff on both of our units is like half different on both of those units. There's been a lot of changes. Not, I don't personally know anybody that I work with that has completely left nursing, but they've certainly left the ICU. Um, it's a hard job. It's a really hard job, but it's also a really great job. So there's, you know, I think I think the pandemic sort of just made everybody look at their value system and what really mattered to them. And if there was anything in their life that they were doing that didn't match up with their value system, or they were looking for a change, that was the moment they decided to integrate it. You know, it's like, here's
Mm-hmm.
your opportunity. Life's short.
So
Let's
true.
do you.
It's so true. I mean, here I am. You know, the last time
Yeah.
we did this, I was in a completely different place in my life.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, so much has changed. Are you hopeful now that we're kind of coming out of this? And like you said, cases are down in your hospital. You're not seeing as many people coming in with COVID. Are you hopeful that we're going to be able to kind of maybe not completely close the door, but put this behind us?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at that place right now. Our cases in the hospital are very low. They're the lowest they've ever been, which is promising. Things can change, but hopefully we have better ways to adapt. Everybody has their masks ready to go.
Yeah, a whole drawer full of them, seriously, just in case.
I
Uh,
have so many in this top drawer of my dresser, and I'm like, what do I do with these right now?
right?
Um, I don't think the healthcare industry is ever going to be the same, or industry, whatever. I don't know if it's an industry, but I don't think it's ever going to be the same. I don't think we're going to be taking masks off there anytime soon, which is a change. We used to go to work with our hair down and, no mask and treating patients, and that's not happening now. But, I am hopeful that this chapter is closing. I do think that we should take this opportunity to revisit our health as a nation, because we have some really, really bad habits, um, especially in the form of diet and exercise. Um, it probably isn't being helped by this, social media culture where everybody's glued to a computer. But I think we need to um, stop focusing and relying on doctors and medicine to save us and start focusing on how we can take responsibility for our own health. And that will really prevent, you from getting a whole host of conditions.
Right. It's not just COVID we all have to worry about.
No,
There's the flu every year, but even more so, like, there's so
there's
many things. I
there's
don't like to think about
cardiac
them.
disease. I mean, like heart disease is like the number one killer. Diabetes is raging. Like cancer still exists, there's high cholesterol levels. People are dying of heart attacks all of the time, and they don't even know that they have any type of issues until they have a heart attack, and then it severely affects their quality of life. So everybody's going to encounter a healthcare problem or need at some point in their life, and hopefully you're living a lifestyle that is health forward or promotes your own health, and you're not doing yourself a disservice by putting foods and substances in your body that are going to destroy it, because certainly that causes lots of problems.
Right. It's like more of a culture problem than a
Hmm.
COVID problem, I think, when it comes to the overall picture of health.
Yeah.
I was raised in the fast food generation, and like it has taken a lot of work and continues to be a lot of work for me to break a lot of the habits that were just kind of fed down through the system of like not knowing what was in our food and just convenience culture and all these things. And, that's a whole topic for another day. But I know you
Yeah.
are going into more of preventative medicine, and you're about to be, or have you graduated? You're on the verge of being a nurse practitioner now, right?
Yeah, I graduate in May. I graduate May 21st. I'm not counting. Not counting at
So
all.
what then? You won't be working in an ICU anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. Everybody's asking me this question right now, but the degree that I'm getting is family nurse practitioner, so that I'm trained to be a primary care provider throughout the lifespan, like birth to death, essentially. Um, the schooling for that looks like, you do adult clinic, you do OB, and you do pediatrics. So I've been doing those things for the last 3 years, and you get a certain number of clinical hours, and you study all the diseases and the pharmacotherapy, and all of the
All the
things again,
things.
and then I have to sit for my boards, and then I get my family nurse practitioner license, and basically that enables me to prescribe and manage care. Um, so yeah, there are a lot of things I can do with that. The emphasis of my degree is primary care, so that's like, your neighborhood provider. I don't want to say doctor because I always say doctor, but I'm a nurse practitioner, not a doctor. But oftentimes people come into the nurse practitioner's office and they call you doctor because that's what they think you are. Because that's how you,
doctor.
because you're doing the things that a doctor has historically done, right, in primary care. So in any case, that's my degree. But you can also work in acute care with that degree. You can work on different teams in the hospital, like the surgery team, or, the neurocritical care team, or the bone marrow transplant team, or the emergency room. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I will have some options. The possibilities are endless. The world is my oyster.
Right. Well, with your resume too, it's like,
Yeah.
I feel like you're kind of qualified to work in any department.
I could do
really.
Botox. I mean, like literally anything. Like I could literally do anything.
Well, let me know if you just become like a regular old nurse practitioner, because I want to come to you. I don't have a primary care doctor that I'm like super into.
About.
So yeah, I would love to come to someone who I'm like, okay, we get along. I trust you,
Yeah.
And how important do you think having a relationship like that with a primary care physician is? Because I feel like everybody's always telling me like, you need to find your primary care physician. And I've just never found one that I'm like super stoked about.
Yeah, I think that I just wrote a paper on this. So I think that the most important part of a primary care and patient relationship is the communication factor, because we always talk about in primary care medicine how getting a good history from your patient is the most important piece of information, right? Like, what were you doing? What are your symptoms? When did this start? What are you, doing to treat these at home? And that sort of helps us in the setting of all of these other diagnostic tests that we're doing, create this like a whole picture. So obviously the information that you're telling your provider is very important, and you need to be comfortable enough to tell your provider that information.
And honest.
And honest, right? Because I don't care what drugs you do. I just want to know what drugs you do so I can develop my plan of care, right? Or whatever. That's just one example. Or what foods you eat or whatever. I just want to help you get to your healthiest version of yourself with your values. So it's not really my job as a provider to tell you what to do, but to formulate a plan that works with your set of circumstances. So it's very important to find a provider that you can communicate with and that you feel comfortable with, because they're going to be looking at all of your parts, and like all of your labs, and they're going to know you better than any other person. And if you're not comfortable with them, you're probably not getting the best care.
Yeah, such good advice. Okay, so I mean, we've talked about everything in this conversation. I love it. Is there anything else you feel like people need to know about the pandemic, where we're at, or just your experience in general?
Oh gosh. I would say right now, I think things are on the mend. I think we're getting better. If things don't change, if they continue to go the direction that we're going, I think everybody should just take a breath and, start healing themselves. I think now we are on a different path, and that path is let's fix all the damage that was done over the last 2 years. Let's do whatever we need to do as human beings to reach out to each other and to, work on ourselves to be the best versions of ourselves and be the best versions for our communities that we can be. Because there's a lot of division over the last 2 years. And I think that, and obviously a lot of trauma and sadness and, struggle and challenge. And I think we all just need to give each other a little bit of grace and try to reach out and understand the other side and keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And that's really why I brought you on, because I feel like we are at this place of healing. And I mean, pointing fingers, blaming anybody for what has happened, how it happened, what could have gone better, what could have been done differently isn't going to get us anywhere now. You know, it's
Right.
the past is in the past. There's nothing we can do. And there has been so much collective trauma that we've all
Mhm.
experienced. And really, the only way to heal that is to build trust with other people again, to build trust with ourselves again, to build trust with our government again, whatever that looks like. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
a whole
yeah.
other can of worms. But yeah, I really do feel like the focus is on healing now. And I hope that people take that to heart and take on that assignment, because it's not an easy thing to do, to heal. So you
And
said
I
that.
think to take responsibility for, my sister has this saying, take responsibility for the condition that you're in. So instead of, because you can always point the finger in the opposite direction or away from you, right? That's easy. We all like to do that. But no matter what the challenge is, if you're always asking yourself, how can I take responsibility for this problem? How can I take responsibility for, you know, my part of the solution? Then, you're not pointing fingers and you can actually do something about whatever challenge you're facing. You can't change someone else, but you can certainly, work on yourself.
I feel like you're a great example of that too, because you show up on social media and you're just like very real and you share your experience, but you also talk about like, I feel like you're so good at being like, here is what I'm doing to try to make my life better. And I'm going to lead by example and show you how I lead a healthy life, what I do as someone who is seeing the sadness in the world firsthand. Like, this is what I'm doing to be okay and to be healthy, and I really admire that about you, that you
Thank
do lead
you.
by example and you show up and you're not afraid to just like put yourself out there and be vulnerable and be honest. So I do appreciate that.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
So we end all of these, you're going to love this, with a card pull. And it's an oracle deck. It's not a tarot deck, but it's a newer one. It's called the Rose Oracle. I know you
I've
have some
seen that
roses in
one.
your garden.
I do.
Yes. So while I'm shuffling and getting our card ready, I'm just going to pull up your Instagram. I know this is the way that you connect with people best, but if there's anything else you want to say just about how you show up on Instagram, all the fun stuff you post. You always post great stuff about your garden too. Seriously, inspiring me to be a better gardener, because I'm not a green thumb. It's not my strong suit, but
I know,
you
I
are. Your
love
garden is
it. I
gorgeous.
love it. I'm always out there. I was out there all morning today. No, check it out. There's a little something for everyone in my Instagram, I think.
There really is. Like we talked about at the beginning, you're just like, this is what I feel like. This is the identity I'm going to be today, and this is the identity I'm going to be tomorrow. And it's
I
just,
think when we first met, I was doing all that stuff for Goodwill, like trying to get people to avoid fast fashion and whatever. I was doing those events. What was my point? Oh, what was my point? I don't know. I forgot. But oh, I had a lot of, my Instagram was very like curated. Like it was all these like really fancy, like glamorous pictures of me in these like cool thrifted outfits, right? And now
yeah.
I'm just like, I'm in school. I'm tired. I'll post this tarot card picture, you know?
I also have to say, somebody else commented this too, but when you posted this picture,
That's
it
my
was like,
husband and I.
I know, I'm like, that straight up looks like an illustration of you and your husband.
Doesn't it? It's so funny. I picked that. It was like, I like to do, I don't know if you do past, present, future.
I have, yeah.
But like, so I like to do past, present, future. So I did that for myself. And then there was a card that like flipped over on accident, and that was it. And I'm not, this is kind of a new deck for me. So I hadn't seen that card before. And I was like, that's Justin and I.
It's so cute. I like, I wish you could just like make a copy of it and frame that or something, but
I know, it's so
got to
cute.
complete the deck. But yeah, I love it. Okay, are you ready for our card pull?
I'm ready.
Okay. What do we need to know today? Ooh, okay. We pulled the Mystic Rose: compassion, devotion, humility, humanity, grace. So let me pull up
Yay.
the description and the
The
guidebook. But
book.
already, this has this seems
It's like
pretty
the
on.
theme. It's the
I
theme for our
know, I know.
conversation.
I love this deck too because I mean they're all kind of rose themed, but it's very feminine and somebody told me once, I love roses. I'm very drawn to
Mm-hmm.
roses. Like I have a ton around my house, and like growing, around my
Mm-hmm.
house with native roses. But someone told me once, like, oh, roses are such old lady flowers. Like I hate roses. I'm like, who doesn't like roses?
You're an old lady flower.
Yeah. Okay, here's what it says. The rose was a symbol of the goddesses of old. So it's no wonder that when Christianity absorbed large parts of the indigenous Celtic traditions in Europe, the mother goddess, Mother Mary, became associated with the rose. Perhaps the reason Mary is so beloved is because she was the only mother goddess who could be worshipped safely, and as such carries with her the devotion and yearning of all those who longed to worship the goddess in a feminine form. Mary's connection with the rose is seen in some of her titles, including Rosa Mystica, the mystic rose, and the rose without thorns. Like those of the pagan goddesses before her, the processions that honored Mary involved walking on rose petals. The church altered the stories of goddesses past, including those that featured roses, such as Aphrodite turning the white rose red with her blood, putting Mary in the goddess's place. Churches were erected all over Europe and beyond, in many cases on the site of Celtic temples and places of goddess worship. Many had beautiful rose windows in the west, the direction of the feminine and dedication to Mary, Mother of the Rose. This is a card of compassion, devotion, and grace. It encourages us to soften towards humanity and to endeavor to see the world and even those who have hurt us with understanding, an open heart, and deep humility. To see that we all carry hurt and are all wounded. We have all experienced severing. Mother Mary is inviting you to open your heart to humanity when you most want to close.
Well said.
Yes, I feel
Yeah,
like
that's
it just
perfect.
reiterating what you said about how we are in a moment of healing now, and it's time to really reach out even to the people who've hurt us or who have different opinions
Yeah.
than us, or who handled things differently than we might have handled them. Blaming, pointing fingers, it's not going to get us anywhere we want to go. And so I love that we pulled this card, reminding us to all connect, be humble, be grateful, be compassionate, see other people's points of view. And I think, we can all connect to the source of unconditional love, right? Like, regardless of what religion you believe in, if you're probably somewhat spiritual, if you clicked on the spiritual journalist, we all believe in something greater than ourselves. And really, that power is love. That power is
Yeah.
oneness, that we're all created equal. So I hope we can all move more towards this. And I love that this is the card we got for this episode.
Me too.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, for agreeing to have this conversation, letting me take a look at your birth chart, do a deep dive into your psyche. Love that.
It's so
And
fun.
I know we'll have to do a deeper reading and look at Justin's too sometime.
Yes, let's do
Yeah.
it.
Yes. But thank you for being here. To those of you who showed up to join the conversation, thank you so much for bringing an open mind, for being willing to just listen and hear Heather's experience. That says a lot about you as a person, and I appreciate that. And yeah, just thank you for being curious. Again, Heather, I can't thank you enough for just being willing to have these conversations. Not all ICU nurses would be willing to just come on and share about such a controversial topic.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We'll be back next week with another episode of The Spiritual Journalist. But until then, stay curious.
Thank you so much for joining our discussion today. If you enjoyed this episode of The Spiritual Journalist, you can find more on thespiritualjournalist.com, or you can listen to our conversations wherever you enjoy podcasts. And if you want to learn more about astrology, join me live every weekday morning on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter for Transits Today, where we break down the energy of the day based on the movement of the planets and start our morning off in a high vibe. All of the information we share on The Spiritual Journalist is completely free to you. So if you'd like to support more content like this, the easiest way to do so is to subscribe to our YouTube page. Head over to the Spiritual Shop on our website and buy yourself a little something. Or if you're feeling extra generous, you can buy me a coffee to fuel future live streams. Just tap the link in the description or head to buymeacoffee.com and search The Spiritual Journalist. I'm so grateful you found us here, and I can't wait for our next conversation.